Hello and welcome to In Parliament. I'm Sharon Tong. Parliament has wrapped up its debate on the Population White Paper and it voted yes to the amended motion tabled by MP Liang Eng-hwa in favour of the White Paper. 77 members of Parliament voted in favour of the motion while 13 objected to it. There was one abstention. A vote was taken after Opposition MP and Secretary-General of the Workers' Party Lau Tia Kiang called for a division, and so an individual vote instead of a collective voice vote was taken on the motion. Weighing in on the discussion on the White Paper, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong stressed that Singaporeans are at the centre of the government's overall plans and that the White Paper on population is an act of faith in Singapore's future. He emphasised that whatever the government does, it is all for the well-being, security and welfare of Singaporeans. Mr. Lee said population is a difficult issue to discuss, but it's the responsible thing to do. He added that the topic is a long-term issue, building trends over the years. That's why the government is working hard to deal with the potential changes, such as building more houses, accelerating the construction of MRT lines, and less reliance on non-Singaporean workers. If plans are not executed now, Mr. Lee believes it will be too late to address the problems when the trends become irreversible.
In parallel, we have to deal with this population issue. This is a multifaceted problem. First is a problem of numbers. How many babies are born? How many people immigrate? How many people emigrate? How many foreign workers we need? What is our TFR? Economy. How do we keep thriving and prospering? But I think I should make my position quite clear. We are not pursuing growth at all costs. We are trying to juggle many different objectives, including population, including cohesion, including our social tensions. And we are trading off, reducing immigration, reducing foreign worker inflows, slowing down the economy significantly, so as to deal with these tensions and pressures, and so as to address other issues which we want, whether it's quality of life, whether it's income equality, whether it's the environment. We accept this because we want the growth to be sustainable, we want high quality growth, and we want workers and families to benefit. Finally, it's for Singaporeans. Growth is not for its own sake. But growth is not unimportant. We can only afford to say that it is not, doesn't matter, because we have already got it. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't be so blasé. You need growth to improve education and healthcare, to build better homes and towns, to invest in reliable and convenient public transport. If you don't have the resources, you will not have the means, and you will not have that quality of life.
And Prime Minister Lee explained further why growth was necessary.
If you are in the top 5–10% of the population, you may say, well, I have enough. I manage, I can live within my means. If you are at the bottom 10–20% of the population, or even the median Singaporean, not poor, not rich, I think it would be patronizing and cavalier for us to say they don't need more. Growth is unimportant. It is important for us to raise the income of the low-income Singaporeans. It is important that we are able to have growth which enables a broad mass of Singaporeans to improve their lives. And when people say that the cost of living is high, I want help with cost of living, really the best solution is if your incomes can go up and you have more means to afford the things which you want, then you will be under less pressure. But for the incomes to grow up, unless the economy grows, I must rob Peter to pay Paul. And somebody has to volunteer, take the money from me, give it to them. And it is not a sustainable solution.
And the government is particularly concerned about three groups of Singaporeans: the older citizens, low-income Singaporeans, and the young. The number of elderly is growing significantly in Singapore, but the government will help to take care of them because these seniors have helped build today's Singapore. Prime Minister Lee says Singapore today has 6 working citizens supporting 1 senior citizen. But come 2030, if Singapore curbs immigration and continues with a low fertility rate, only 2 working citizens will be supporting 1 senior citizen. That is triple the burden on a working age Singaporean.
It's easy to say we stop immigration, we stop foreign workers coming in. Aging is a triumph of development, as I think Mr. Chen Xiaomao did. But is it so simple? We'll all get old one day, and we will need healthcare and support one day, hopefully later rather than earlier. But can we solve this problem with re-employed retirees becoming caregivers in old folks' homes? Can one child look after 2 elderly parents, whether financially or physically? Is it sustainable? Is it fair?
On low-income Singaporeans, Mr. Lee said the government has several schemes such as GST voucher and workfare to help them. But the best way is still to create more employment opportunities for these Singaporeans, enabling them to get better jobs and earn more wages. Mr. Lee added the government will also create a vibrant city filled with opportunities and buzz for the young Singaporeans. If the economy stagnates or if Singapore becomes a giant retirement home, the Prime Minister warns that the young will leave the country. So the Prime Minister says the nation must strengthen the Singapore identity and to build a solid core group. That's part of the objective of drawing up the white paper in planning for the future. Mr. Lee explains how those who make up the Singapore core may not all be born here, but is made up of people who have their families and built their homes here.
People who embrace our values, our ideals, who have sunk roots here, who've given their loyalty to Singapore, for whom, when you say their pledge and you see the helicopter flying past on National Day, it's a special moment. Many will have been living in the heartlands, been to school together. We will share memories and experiences. ESM Go talked about some recently, national service, in this debate, national service, SARS, the global financial crisis, 9/11. Fears as well as joys. People willing to defend our nation, our families and friends, our way of life, because we feel as one together. We share sorrows together, even if it's not our own personal immediate family. When 2 young boys were knocked down in Tampines, we all grieve with Mr. and Mrs. Francis Yap. We celebrate successes together. And we want Singaporeans, please have more children. In fact, please get married and then have more children. To inherit what we have built and to build on what you will inherit. To create a community which can trace its roots back through the generations.
And Mr. Lee gave the assurance that the government will track and control the number of immigrants coming into Singapore. But whether the Singapore core is strong and how the transients, such as construction workers, will fit into the society will depend largely on the role the different groups play.
We will always put Singaporeans first and make sure that the benefits of our population and our population policies flow to Singaporeans. First of all, in our society, we make sure that Singaporeans are clearly in the majority so that our identity is not diluted by new arrivals. Secondly, in our policies, treating Singaporeans better than non-Singaporeans, especially when it comes to healthcare, education and housing. And thirdly, in our workforce, giving Singaporeans every opportunity to upgrade and take up good jobs and enjoy fair and equal treatment from employers. And I know there are grouses. I heard Professor Eugene Tan talk about his specific issues, and Mr. Patrick Tay raised this also from a union point of view, but we will make sure that Singaporeans are fairly treated. It has to be so, and it will always be so, because the government is elected by Singaporeans and responsible to Singaporeans. But let me add also that at the same time, Singaporeans cannot afford to be just here for the ride, passengers. We are not an oil state where citizens can live on the oil wealth and non-citizens do the work. For Singapore to thrive, we Singaporeans must always stay lean and hungry. If we lose our drive, we will lose out.
Prime Minister Lee reminded Singaporeans that the country is not only a cosmopolitan city, it is also a nation. So there was a need to have both vibrancy and openness, as well as a sense of identity and belonging.
That is a very difficult combination to create. To be cohesive without being closed, to identify with one another and not be xenophobic, to be open and yet not to be diluted and dissolved. But that is our karma, and we have to keep a balance between the two. The third aspect of the population issue is the economy. How do we keep thriving and prospering? I almost hesitate to make this argument because everybody in the chamber, or so it sounded, or many people in this chamber and many people outside too, have taken the view that economics is not so important and that we have overemphasized economics as a government. And I think I should make my position quite clear. We are not pursuing growth at all costs. We are trying to juggle many different objectives, including population, including cohesion, including our social tensions. And we are trading off reducing immigration, reducing foreign worker inflows, slowing down the economy significantly, so as to deal with these tensions and pressures, and so as to address other issues which we want, whether it's quality of life, whether it's income equality, whether it's the environment. We accept this because we want the growth to be sustainable, we want high quality growth, and we want workers and families to benefit. Finally, it's for Singaporeans. Growth is not for its own sake. But growth is not unimportant. We can only afford to say that it is not, doesn't matter, because we have already got it. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't be so blasé. You need growth to improve education and healthcare, to build better homes and towns, to invest in reliable and convenient public transport. If you don't have the resources, you will not have the means, and you will not have that quality of life.
He added that he believed Singapore's total population by 2030 should be significantly below 6.9 million and should not increase further beyond that. In fact, Prime Minister Lee believes that come 2030, a population of 6 million will not be sufficient to meet Singaporeans' needs. This as the nation's population ages rapidly. But Mr. Lee said eventual population size will be something for the future generation to decide. In the meantime, he said the country must build up the infrastructure ahead of demand so that people will not feel the kind of strains they are experiencing today. Mr. Lee reiterated that the government is not aiming to boost Singapore's population to 6.9 million by 2030.
We are not deciding on a population of 6.9 million for 2030 now. And the white paper actually made that clear, but the number got taken out of context and it took on a life of its own. 6.9 million is not a population target. It's a basis for us to plan our infrastructure for the long term. Because we need to build ahead of demand and give ourselves options for the future and buffer. And we have to start building now, and we cannot push it off to the future. If you want a new housing estate, if you want new train lines, it takes many years to build, and once completed, it's going to be there for many, many more years. So beyond 2020, things are still vague, uncertain. And therefore, nearer 2020, we will review the population projections and our policies again. And then we can decide how much further we should slow down in that next decade. To reduce the workforce growth to 1%, which is what the white paper projects, or to cut even further.
Mr. Lee pointed out that Singapore's population will not grow indefinitely. Even with reclamation, he said Singapore's land is finite.
We can reclaim. We'll have another few hundreds, or another 100 square kilometers, 10,000 hectares, possibly. But reclamation doesn't push my international boundary. And even if I went all the way up to my international boundary and filled up Raffles Lighthouse, that's just that, and it will fill up. So it's finite. So eventually we must reach zero population growth. Already the white paper projects slower growth to 2020 in the population, and even slower growth beyond 2020 in the decade beyond that. Eventually we will reach zero population growth. When? Where? Time will tell.
Mr. Lee acknowledged that while the population plan was trying to set out what it proposed to do from now to 2020 and beyond, it was hard to have 2020 foresight.
The opposition laughs at us why we don't have 2020 foresight. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2030. Even in 2020, you cannot be sure. How will the world be? How will Singapore be? What will we need to do? It will depend on many things, on our TFR, how much progress we make in restructuring, on the global situation, what happens in the world around us. Is it peace? Is it war? Is it prosperity? Is it a recession or depression or worse? And therefore, we cannot decide on a population trajectory beyond 2020. That has to be left to a future government and future Singaporeans to decide. And in particular, especially, we are not deciding on a population of 6.9 million for 2030 now. And the white paper actually made that clear, but the number got taken out of context and it took on a life of its own.
Finally, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says the government will continue to discuss key issues like how to restructure the economy to rely less on foreign workers and how to strengthen the Singapore identity. Taking note of the public and the members of Parliament's feedback, he says the discussion will continue. But he called on Singaporeans to work together with the government and to support the policies laid out for the betterment of the country.
This is an issue not just for the government or the PAP, but for all Singaporeans, including all political parties. And we have to go beyond the rhetoric to develop actual plans that address our challenges and improve our lives. And I ask for your support in doing this. If we make the right choices, our future is bright. We are in a strong position with a high international standing. We've overcome long odds before with creativity and fortitude. In our darkest days after separation in 1965, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew vowed to Singaporeans, 10 years from now, this will be a metropolis. Never fear. And we did it. Together we built a nation. So never fear. We can build an even better Singapore for all Singaporeans. Madam Speaker, I support the amended motion.
And wrapping up the debate in Parliament, Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean reiterated the government's promise that Singaporeans' interests were at the centre of the debate.
It has been an intense 5 days. Seldom have I seen members on both sides of the House rise and speak with so much intensity and passion. We have heard more than 70 members share their views, concerns, and suggestions on this important issue of population. This is the longest debate in my memory that we have had on any single motion in Parliament. And so it should be. it reflects the importance that members have placed on the far-reaching implications of our population challenge.
Also addressing concerns about the need to sustain a strong Singaporean core, Mr. Teo said the key to doing that was to encourage marriage and parenthood, and it was families and Singaporeans that were at the centre of the government's plans.
So I think of the seniors and how we can take care of them and help them stay active, healthy, and engaged in the community. I think of the young lady now in secondary school who has a life ahead of him or her. We need to make preparations now so that she can have an exciting and fulfilling career in Singapore, so that she can be near her parents, to be there for them in the same way as they are there for her today.
Mr. Teo says there are no easy solutions, but what the white paper was proposing was a significant slowdown in the growth of the workforce and population.
Our population challenge is complex and multifaceted, with many interlinked parts. Raising birth rates, taking care of our aging population, creating good jobs for Singaporeans, ensuring a good living environment for everyone. The white paper is proposing a major shift, a significant slowdown in our rate of workforce and population growth and GDP growth compared to the path that we are on. This is a carefully balanced path between two extremes, neither carrying on with the rapid growth rates of the last 3 decades, which would take us beyond our capacity, nor having a freeze, which would stall the economy and be harmful to Singaporeans. Hence, supporting the motion is supporting making this significant shift, but in a balanced way, and signals that we should not take either extreme.
Mr. Teo also gave the assurance that the government will carry out medium-term reviews of its population policies, and in doing so, it will take into account Singaporeans' changing social and economic needs, as well as changes to the country's domestic and external circumstances.
Voting for the motion does not mean that the conversation stops. The conversation continues, and so it should. The conversation on population did not start this week in this House. It started slowly but earnestly about a year ago when we started consulting Singaporeans of all ages from different walks of life. Similarly, the conversation does not end in this room today. The end of this debate does not mark the end of the discussion on this very important issue. The discussion should and must continue.
Earlier, the Deputy Prime Minister also apologised for an error in the white paper regarding the nursing profession.
I'd like to inform members that I intend to make a corrigendum to footnote 12 on page 40 of the population white paper to delete this segment. Certain low-skilled jobs like personal services, retail and nursing are hard to offshore. They will still be needed even as the economy upgrades, unquote. This classification of low-skilled jobs is not correct. I'd like to apologize to those whose professions have been unintentionally misrepresented. I personally have the greatest respect for those in the nursing profession, which is a noble and caring profession which all of us and our loved ones depend on and appreciate.
Acting Minister for Social and Family Development Chan Chun Sing also spoke on the challenges facing Singapore. He said the roots of Singapore's challenges lie in the country's ageing population and families. On the issue of a widening income gap, Mr. Chan said many know and accept that not all can progress evenly in a society and equal outcomes cannot be ensured. But he stressed the desire is to maximize opportunities for people to fulfill their potential and diverse aspirations. He added that growth will give Singapore a better chance in helping people improve their lives over time.
We should not hold back those amongst us who can progress faster or further, just to pretend that we can thus achieve equality. Instead, we should let the stronger ones flourish and bring back a bigger harvest for all of us to share. We must imbue in our more successful ones the sense of responsibility and care to help those who are weaker amongst us. We must agree as a society that those who have the least must be given more help.
On calls to halt foreigner growth, Mr. Chan cautioned that this will have an impact on caring for the elderly in Singapore. He said while Singapore tries to increase its labour force participation rate, it also has to be realistic in what it can achieve.
Yes, every one extra Singaporean that I can get is one less foreigner I need. But I cannot assume that increasing the labour force participation rate will solve the problem. Please also do not do a disservice to our stay-at-home mums and assume that they are not doing anything useful and can easily join the workforce if we just increase their salaries. Many of them are already taking care of our old and young. So please have a care when we say no more foreigners to help care for our old and weak.
With regard to families, Mr. Chan said he agreed that families lie at the centre of solutions. Mr. Chan stressed it will require the whole society to embrace the family-first philosophy. He added that most importantly, the government wants to focus on early childhood development. This will ensure that children from less advantaged backgrounds will not start too far behind their peers in schools. Mr. Chan also pointed out that many MPs have said that having families and children go beyond money. But the most important and difficult issue is people's values and perspectives.
On another Saturday morning, I visited a family where everyone was around. I was pleasantly surprised. I asked, did the children not have CCA or other lessons? The mother shot back at me with a reply, weekends are family time. Protected time. Time to bond as a family, time to do things together as a family. No overtimes for parents, no extra lessons for kids. This family has made another choice. I hope we have more families like this.
Mr. Chan also made the call not to start drawing lines to divide who a true Singaporean is or isn't.
When I was in the army, I had a unit where there were only 8 out of 32 soldiers whom some in the house would call true blue Singaporeans. The rest were either not born here nor raised here. I asked, why would they fight together? None of them gave me a highbrow answer like, how many percent of Singaporeans are there in Singapore? They fight because their buddies fight alongside them. They will defend this place because this is home, where they share common experiences, common values, and most importantly, a common vision for a better tomorrow. Our job is to do our best to support our NS men in their duties to our country. Our job is not to constantly talk down their motivation, deflate their morale, and question their sacrifice. Will members of this House fight for Singaporeans and Singapore if there are X or Y million foreigners living here amongst us? If our answer is yes, then the answer from my NS men will be an unequivocal yes as well. But if our answer is no, then I do not need to ask my NS men any further. This is not politics. This is leadership.
Parliament has adjourned. Good night.